Hi, so this is the video of Tuthmose III. Wow, he really was quite a remarkable chap. So we're talking 1479 BCE. He was about 2 or 3 years of age until 1425 BCE. So he counts his reign as 54 years. As I mentioned, he was the son of Tuthmose II, and his mother was a lady of the harem, or minor wife. So bear that in mind. His stepmother and aunt was Hatshepsut. She traced her bloodline back to Ahotep of the 17th dynasty, of the great Waset family of Nepepet Ra. So that's how she's thinking. She carries the blue bloodline, whereas Tuthmose III is the mother really of what Hatshepsut would regard as being a prostitute. Now, something special happened. So remember in my Hatshepsut video, I mentioned that there were two factions. So you would have had the Tuthmose faction to make him the king of Egypt, and the Hatshepsut faction, who recognised that she had a real good pedigree. What saved him was that prophecy from Amun-Ra saying that he would be the next king of Egypt. That meant that she couldn't really have him done away or poisoned in the harem. So there was a co-regency between them. The co-regency lasted for around about sort of 3 years, and then Hatshepsut declared herself as regent for another couple of years, and then king of Egypt. So he had to wait around about 20 years for his aunt to rule the country and die, which was not a bad thing really, because that meant he was about 22, 23 years of age. In our culture, that's still young, but in their culture, you're an adult. Males were circumcised at 14 or 15, they got married at 16, and they were parents at 17. Females got married at 14 or 15 and had their first child by 15 or 16. So it was a very young, youthful civilization. And remember, they had those strict guidelines because it was a very short life cycle. Between sort of 35 to 45 years of age was a generation. If you hear any scratching in the background, that's my cat Persephone. Anyway. We've got to keep it real, haven't we? So the rites, I've mentioned the rites of passage. So he was an adult at that time. So that was the situation when he came to the throne of Egypt. We think that, I think it was around about year 18 of Hatshepsut's reign, she made Tuthmose III the general of his armies. So he had lots of military experience before he became king of Egypt. And that's what we're going to look at next. We're going to look at his campaigns. So his campaigns, had 16 campaigns, military campaigns, over 20 years. Now, why was he campaigning at all? Think about the trade routes which are coming from sort of modern, ancient Anatolia, modern day Turkey, out of Iran and Iraq, into Syria, through Canaan, into Egypt, from the Mediterranean, up and down Central Africa, the River Nile. So everything's going well if those areas are controlled by single rulers or single civilization. But Syria was an area of city-states. So they didn't have one ruler. And the same with Canaan. Canaan were lots of large towns, who budding cities as such, not big cities. So in Canaan, towns are around about 2,500 living souls. The Syrian towns are between 2,000 and 5,000 living souls. And they bicker, they argue. So let's say you had a trade caravan leaving Assyria, and it's crossing through the kingdom of Mitanni. So you've got to pay a tribute, a tax. So let's say you pay 5 units from your caravan, and then you get into Syria, and on the borders of Syria at Kadesh, they charge you 5 units. And then you get to Tunip and they charge you another 5 units. And then you get all the way down to Canaan. And before you know it, the caravan's only got 40 units left. Not enough for anything. So these are unreasonable taxation placed on caravans affected the Egyptians' ability to level taxes themselves. And if caravans and trade missions are being overtaxed so much, they don't happen. So that's probably why I think the Egyptians took part in this arena of the retinue and the Levant. I think it was because of the trade routes and taxation. They saw the Syrians and the Canaanites as troublesome, bickering children. They always had problems. So the first campaign was the King of Kadesh. So the King of Kadesh had formed an alliance with the other powerful cities in Syria, and he wanted to assert his power over the city of Megiddo. So they must have envoys down to Canaan to see if they'd take part, and obviously the Canaanites are, still budding, growing region. So Moses sets out with his army from Egypt, and when they get to a pass, Mount Carmel Pass, he has 3 options. You can go north and south. Those 2 routes are the safest. Or he can go through the pass itself, which is really narrow and could be dangerous because of ambush. However, the pass does give him an advantage. So he brings his generals together, he asks for their opinions, and he says, no, we're going to head for the pass. That brings him out in front of the city of Megiddo and in front of the army of the King of Kadesh. And they have a battle. And the Egyptians win. But unfortunately, instead of the troops pursuing the army as they're trying to rush it to Megiddo for cover, they're plundering the dead soldiers. So that's why soldiers left Egypt. They came there for the plunder, because you could become very rich. Remember, if you was a soldier and you died outside of Egypt, you'd wander the earth as a ghost forever and ever. So that wasn't really a bright proposition. So it had to be worth your while to take the risk with your living soul. Anyway, all the princes of Syria are in this town. So what does Tuthmose III do? He lays siege to the town, which took about 7 or 8 months for the city to fall, and he goes off raiding all the other towns and cities in Syria and Canaan, simply because all their leaders and their armies are inside Megiddo. So it's easy, just go and take what you want. So that's really his first campaign. So after the siege of Megiddo and the plundering of all the Syrian towns in Syria and Canaan, Egypt received gifts from the Hittites, who would be the rising power, the Assyrians, who were another rising power on the horizon, and the Babylonians. The people who backed the Syrian princes against him were the Mitannies across the Euphrates River, and he knew that eventually he would have to deal with them. So his second, third and fourth campaigns were more tours of Canaan and Syria. Now, from the records of Ramesses II, we know that there were 4 divisions in the army, and they were made up of 5,000 troops and auxiliaries. So you're talking about 20,000 people on the move. So when they turned up at the season of harvest in Canaan and Syria, the Canaan cities only had 2,000 or 3,000 people in. The Syrian cities only had between sort of 3,000 to 5,000 citizens living there. And there's this sprawling army of 20,000. You're not going to say no, are you? Especially since both regions are divided by loyalties and domain over small areas. So all of these The second, third and fourth campaigns are more tours. So what are the Egyptians after? They're after wine, they're after oil, they're after small animals like sheep and goats and cattle and things like that. They're not too bothered about wheat and barley because they can grow that in abundance, but those sorts of things, and perfumes as well, those sorts of things were hard to come by in Egypt, and of course copper. So if you had domain over Cyprus, then you'd have a good flow of copper coming into your country. So those are the second, third and fourth campaigns of Tuthmosis.